Hey y'all, Horror Studio 1 here. So California is where the majority of my fan base, especially with the subscribers, is on YouTube. So to thank all you guys for the first episode of North American City Ghost Stories, California is where we'll be doing it. So grab a blanket, turn off your lights, and let's see if these stories are anywhere near you. A black figure on my ceiling. I've never submitted a story before. Please bear with me. This incident took place in Sacramento, California, when I was around 22 to 23 years old. I am now 30. At the time, I decided to stay a night at my boyfriend, now ex-boyfriend's house, because it was getting too late to go home. I was having a really hard time sleeping for some odd reason. I decided to close my eyes thinking, and hopefully I would eventually fall asleep. Well, as soon as I had done so, I felt my chest getting really heavy, and I was having a hard time breathing. I started praying. Sleep paralysis has happened to me before, in my head. I believe it was a couple seconds later, it had gotten off of me. I was really freaked out, but when I was laying there, when it was over, so I thought, I just happened to look up towards the ceiling, and what I saw, I will never forget. It looked to be a black figure facing me with white eyes, and its hands and legs, for some odd reason, looked like it was stuck to the ceiling, but its body and face were facing me. I don't know if that makes sense or not. I don't know how long I must have laid there looking at it, and it looking at me. As soon as I was out of the shock, I jumped off the bed and ran for the lights. But when I did that, I looked to the ceiling again and it was gone. Till this day, I still cannot explain to myself what it was. I have never seen anything like that. But I did have experience with sleep paralysis, but I've never seen anything when it was over. Can someone please tell me what they think it might be? Thanks for reading my story. I have many more to come. The Lorona in Long Beach, California. It was the weekend after Thanksgiving, Saturday around 3 a.m. 2011. My sister and I were watching movies on Netflix, enjoying our days off due to the holiday. Everyone was sleeping because, after all, it is very early in the morning. All of a sudden, we began to hear a moan crying sound coming from a woman. It was very loud and it was terrifying. It sounded ugly, like a woman in pain or despair. It went on for about 20 seconds, then it stopped for 10 to 15 seconds. Then it began again, even louder. I told my sister to grab the phone to be ready to call the police because I thought a woman was being raped or assaulted near our house. I stepped outside, scared, to see if I could prevent a crime. When I got to the front of the house, there was no one outside, yet the crying was literally in front of me. It was a foggy night too. My sister came out, and the crying lasted for about 2 minutes. We were puzzled, we looked at each other, and we both got chills. We were both thinking the same thing. I don't want to come to any conclusions. I'm Hispanic, and grew up with the legend of the Llorona. Many people in the Hispanic community swear that evil spirits do exist, and even say that they have heard the cries in their native countries and in Southern California. Could it have been a prank by some local teenagers? Yes, but maybe that is the case. But that doesn't explain why I heard a woman moaning literally 20 feet from me and not a soul outside at 3 in the morning. I am convinced I heard the Llorona in Long Beach, California. Black hat, trench coat, changing face, and loss of time. It was 8:07 p.m., and there was an amazing pink sunset that summer night. I remember the view coming down the hill that night. My sister and I needed to run to the 7-Eleven that was about 3 miles away to grab a pack of smokes and some vino. Classy, I know, but I was 21 at the time and was glad to be able to. So mission accomplished. We headed home. Couldn't have been a longer than 10 minutes. However, when we got to the main intersection after driving through the suburbs for 5 minutes, the night seemed to have fallen rather quickly. I mean, it was dark. On top of that, the fog rolled in like no one's business, and fog in San Diego in the middle of summer is almost unheard of, at least at 8 p.m. inland. So, we sat at the main intersection to get home, which crossed a main thoroughfare, and we sat, and we sat. We realized that quite some time had passed, and absolutely no cars on a main thoroughfare that is quite busy. We had been talking together like us gals do, and we didn't even notice that the radio wasn't playing any music. I assumed I had turned the volume down. Nope. We only realized that when we looked down at the clock and it was 8:52 p.m. 8:52, that made no sense, and we commented on it. And fog, and complete darkness like it would be at, say, 3 a.m. Wait, we were so confused and commented at such. I would have ran the light, but this is a main intersection, and with the fog from nowhere, bad idea. I mean, God forbid a car rolled through right then. I mean, me being the older sister opted to wait it out and lighted another smoke, still trying to get the tunes on the radio to work. A no-go. My sister and I got real quiet while we waited. Conversation died from confusion, so we puffed our smokes, looked around, commenting on how creepy everything felt, and then at the same time, what the hell is that? No, not who, but what? Because it was so bizarre. Out of a deep raven that ran along the throughway, there was full of trees, and out of the trees came a thing. I won't even call it a man. It was wearing a black wide-brim hat and trench coat, that was for sure. The rest is unexplainable. It had no feet, it had no hands, and it did not move like a human. It looked like it was walking with a limp, or like it was in a body that it didn't know how to operate. It walked straight out of its raven, which is not possible, forested area onto this highway, and made a beeline for my car. And I used the term walk very loosely. It was awkward and weird. I thought for a second that I should help him because he seemed to be having trouble. Then I noticed how swiftly he was navigating this road and realized it was headed straight for my car and with purpose. As it advanced, I stared straight under that hat so I could remember this very odd situation, and I'll say this. To this day, I cannot explain what I saw. His face seemed to morph. It looked like an owl, a turtle, an eagle, a horse, and at one point a human, but looked like a stereotypical mask-type face with no distinguishing marks, and it just kept on changing. My sister started to get hysterical, and at the same time we were both saying, what the fuck, what the fuck, what the fuck, over and over, because it was completely unexplainable. She yelled at me to roll up the window, which I did, but we still sat and stared. He crossed about 60 yards in 5 seconds. He was headed straight for my car. There was nothing else in sight. It had to be us. My sister was screaming at me to run the light, but I couldn't. Call it curiosity, numbness, not wanting to cross a highway in thick fog. I don't know. I was not moving. In retrospect, it was complete curiosity. I was scared, no doubt, but I wanted to see what he was doing. He got within feet of my car, inches on the driver's side, my side. Then I realized he wanted us. He lunged for my door handle and had what seemed like freakishly long arms. At that exact moment, the light turned green and I floored it out of there. We ran the intersection before I looked in the rearview mirror. My sister, however, stared at him the whole way through, and as we sped off, his arms raised in the air as if to say, ugh. She told me to see how he was throwing what she called a tantrum in the intersection. My eyes on the road, going back up said first hill in the beginning of the story. I didn't catch it. She said she watched him vanish into thin air. I just saw that he was gone, no longer in the middle of the road. So we got home, and my mom is freaking out at us, standing in the middle of the driveway with the neighbors, crying. We get inside of the house, and the clock is reading 10:43. 10:43! Where had that time gone? We told her the story, I'm assuming, because she told us we did several years later, but don't remember doing that, and never talked about that experience for at least 5 years. Not the next morning, not with my mom. She didn't bring it up, nada. It was like it was gone from our memory. Then one evening, my sister and I were on my balcony 5 to 6 years later, and I had no idea why or how, but the whole story popped up into my head. And I asked her if she remembered it. She went completely pale, and we were both covered in goosebumps. It felt like a dream because I hadn't thought about it since. But it was completely real because I know I lived it. She told the exact same recollection I had without any guidance. It was like it was erased from our memory. But once it was popped back in and we talked about it, it was as vivid as like it had happened yesterday. I remember every detail, obviously. It's still as vivid 9 years later. She hates when I bring it up and gets sick to her stomach. I find it fascinating and am totally curious what you all think.